Being a delivery driver for several pizza places a few years back, I had a lot of experiences with weird customers or just strange things that would happen at night. But this one night takes the prize for the most disturbing and unusual situation. I had been working at the specific chain pizza shop for just under a year. I worked mid-shifts and night shifts alongside one other coworker for the most part. It would stay busy basically up until closing at 2 a.m., so there wasn't a ton of time to mess around, especially since it was just the two of us. I'll call my coworker Tom to keep his privacy. Tom was older than me by a few years and was a quiet, hard worker. He was in charge during the night shifts and would make all the pizzas while I would deliver them. Both of us would answer calls though, depending on who was busy and who wasn't. Anyway, it was just past 11 p.m. and I had gotten back from a delivery when the phone rang. Seeing Tom in the middle of making a pizza, I picked up the phone. A man on the other line spoke, asking for a large sausage pizza. I put in the order and asked if he needed anything else. The man didn't answer for a moment. Then he repeated himself, saying that he'd like a large sausage pizza. This time, I could tell through the way he mumbled it out that he was likely drunk. I confirmed that he just wanted one pizza, and the man said yes. I sent the order through, then grabbed my next delivery and dropped it off. Getting back to the shop, Tom had finished the guy's order and prepped it for delivery, so I grabbed it off the counter and ran to my car. I noticed, as I was grabbing the order though, Tom was giving me a weird look, as if he wanted to say something to me, but he decided not to. Again though, Tom was pretty quiet and soft-spoken, so it wasn't very odd. The address was a good 15 minutes away, but there was no traffic at this time, so I got there pretty early. The house was normal, but had a lot of land on either side, with the neighbors' homes barely visible through the trees. I got out and went around to the passenger door to pick up the pizza. Then I headed up to the porch and knocked on the door. A few seconds later, a man came and opened the door wide open. This wasn't all that strange, but I always found it odd when people would open their door that wide, as it was just unnecessary. But his face when he saw me seemed very confused and surprised, as if he hadn't expected to see me. Figuring he was just drunk and out of it, I handed him the box and told him his total, to which he slowly and awkwardly handed me cash, not saying anything. He held the box of pizza while standing in front of me and looked at it with a strange intensity. Then he moved his eyes up towards me, but not at me. He was looking over my shoulder like he saw something, but was just staring at it with that same intensity before shaking his head slowly like he was saying no. Getting really uncomfortable watching this man, I couldn't help but look back. I turned my head over my right shoulder and looked toward the driveway. Just a few feet from my car was a hooded man running back toward the trees. My heart jumped and I felt my body go into a sort of shock, trying to figure out what to do. I turned back around to face the man at the door, but he immediately stepped back and slammed the door shut. It all happened so fast, in just a matter of seconds, and gave me no time to react. With the door closed in front of me, I turned to face the hooded man again, but he was lost in the dark tree line. I stumbled off the porch and ran to my car, backing out of the driveway as soon as possible and driving back to work. I calmed myself during the drive, but still couldn't understand what happened. When I got back, I told Tom about the encounter, who seemed to have very little reaction and rather just told me to deliver the next order when I was ready. I did as he said, but on my way back from the delivery, I ended up pulling over and calling the police to let them know, just in case. They said they would have an officer check it out and call me back to update me. I got a call an hour later, and once I got out of work, I waited in the parking lot for the police to show up and talk to me. When the officer came up to my car, he mentioned that he talked to the man at the residence who matched the description I gave him, and the guy told the officer that he was just waiting for his buddy, Tom, to show up since he knew he worked at the pizza shop. When asked about the hooded man, he gave no details, saying he didn't know anything about that and he didn't see anyone. With that information, I was even more horrified and confused. I thought maybe they called thinking Tom was a delivery driver and were setting him up so that they could jump him. That would explain the hooded man by my car, and the surprise of the guy at the door. I also think back to that look Tom gave me, thinking maybe he was going to warn me of something. I talked to Tom on multiple occasions about it though, but he gave me quick, useless answers, saying the guy was just an old friend and that he didn't know anything about anything. I moved on to another pizza shop very soon after that incident. But now that the horror of the situation is in the past, and I know it likely wasn't a target on me specifically. I enjoy trying to figure out the mystery. I still don't know for sure what the situation was, but it was by far the strangest and creepiest I've ever had. I was doing my Sunday night drives for extra money with DoorDash and Uber Eats. My friends show me how to use both at the same time and make more money per hour. One of the biggest issues with doing delivery services is that you have a lot of downtime where you just drive around waiting for an order to pop up. But if you work both apps at the same time, you can get rid of all that downtime and constantly be making money. So I was doing this for a few hours, racing back and forth between houses and restaurants, when I got a small order from a nearby restaurant, but the house was far away. These are the worst kinds of orders because you drive far and get paid less, though this one offered a large amount, meaning the tip must be crazy big. Accepting it, I picked up the order and began the 25-minute drive to their address. Halfway through the drive, while on a side road, I got a call from the app, assumingly being the customer. I answered, asking if this was my Uber Eats customer. A man confirmed he was my customer and apologized profusely, saying he ordered from his friend's account and forgot to change the address. He said his house was just around the block though, and he proceeded to give me directions, telling me a couple turns to take once I reached the friend's house. I asked him for the address just in case I got lost, but he responded saying I'll see him outside waiting for him, then hung up. Obviously, this shit was not normal. However, I was more than halfway there at this point, and I gave the man the benefit of the doubt, as forgetting to switch it from your friend's address seemed like a legit thing that could happen. It could have also been the fact that I was a bigger guy that helped me convince myself to go through with the delivery, as I wasn't really afraid of anything. When I got to the supposed friend's house, I took the turns as the man had said, and drove down a dimly lit neighborhood road until I reached a no outlet sign, and saw the road ended just a few houses down. Feeling confident I had taken the turns as the man had said, I pulled over and grabbed my phone to call the customer. Just as I was clicking into my recent calls, a knock at my driver window made me jump. A bit embarrassed at how noticeably startled I was, I rolled the window down to greet him, but looking up at the man, his face had no emotion, just a completely straight, blank face. I let go of the window button and immediately pressed the lock button, which was followed by the man sticking a gun through the half-open window right at my head as he yelled out something. I heard more voices call back, followed by a group of people running up to the car and trying to open the door handles. They were all yelling commands at each other, but in the heat of the moment, I couldn't make out what they were saying. I was in a full-on shock, staring into the barrel of this guy's gun. If I had to guess, there were at least 5 or 6 people surrounding my car. In this moment, I don't even remember having any thoughts, but I can only describe it as more of a reflex-type reaction, because when the man holding the gun looked away for a split second, I suddenly slammed on the gas, flooring it down the street. I'm surprised the man even held on to his gun as he pulled his hand out of the window just in time. Seeing the end of the road though, I quickly did a 3-point turn, and when I faced the other end of the street again, they were all gone. Not a single one of them anywhere on the road, sidewalk, or by the houses. They must have just fled the scene the instant I began driving. As soon as I made it out of the neighborhood, I called 911. These gang-type attacks are relatively common around here, but I never thought it would happen to me. Although nothing came of it, with nobody being found and every piece of evidence leading to nowhere, I see this event as a sort of wake-up call for me. I realized in the moment that the man put a gun to my head that being a big, confident man meant absolutely nothing. Taking a risk like that was purely stupid, because literally anyone with a weapon can have your life in their hands in an instant. If you work a job like this, or do anything where you see strangers regularly, be careful, because putting yourself in a risky situation with a stranger could be the last thing you ever do. During COVID, delivering groceries became pretty popular, and even after, people still had them delivered to their house. I was a picker for those orders, and when we were understaffed, which was pretty much all the time, I was also dropping them off. It wasn't a bad job. I actually enjoyed driving to people's homes. I got to see nice houses, and I didn't have to deal with the constant questions from customers, so I wasn't complaining. I got tips sometimes too, which was nice. Most of the time though, I left the groceries at the doorstep, took a picture as proof, and then left. But I did have moments where I got to meet the people and help them take in the groceries. One instance was this older lady from Serbia. Her name was Vesna, and she loved me. We got to know each other, cause every Thursday she'd have pretty much the same stuff ordered to her house at the exact same time. The first few times I dropped off her groceries, she never came outside, but I'd catch her peeking out the window at me. I'd give a little wave, take my picture, then get back in the truck and leave. I think once she realized it was the same person delivering her groceries every time, she got more comfortable. She came out and greeted me, then slowly over time I started bringing in the groceries for her and setting them on her counters. She was pretty old, so I was happy to help, and she also tipped nicely too. The more I went, the more I got to know her. She was recently widowed and lived alone. All her children lived far away, and she only saw them once or twice a year for the holidays when she could take the train. She was also retired, but she used to be a broker, which explained her nice house. I always looked forward to Thursdays, and this one was no different. She had ordered everything on Monday, as she always did, and I was dropping off the following Thursday. When I pulled into the driveway, I immediately noticed that something was off. She wasn't at the door like she usually was, but the door was open. I also noticed that all her blinds were closed, which was strange. She always kept them open so her plants could get some sun. I went up to the open front door, and not seeing her, I rang the doorbell. I waited for a bit, but there was no answer. I knocked a few times, and there was no answer again, so I naturally started to become a little worried. She was old, so my immediate thought was maybe she fell or had a heart attack or something. I kinda stood there wondering what I should do. I thought maybe I should go inside, but I was also on the job, and I know the rules are that if no one answers, I just have to leave the groceries on the porch. Being her friend though, I decided it best to go inside and at least put her groceries on the counter like usual. The door was open, after all. I grabbed all the bags in both of my hands and walked straight into the kitchen. All the lights were off and everything was quiet. Placing the bags on her counter, I called out her name, again, hearing no response. As I started walking out, calling the police crossed my mind, but I didn't really know how to explain this was an emergency, because what if she was just out of the house? Maybe she was just visiting someone, and I just wasted the police officer's time. I really was in a weird position, but I just knew something was wrong. But, just as I got to the doorway leading outside, I heard movement in the house upstairs. I felt relieved for a moment, calling out for Vesna, but then there was again no response. No one came to the door or answered me. After a minute of standing there, I kept hearing shuffling movement as if someone was moving stuff around upstairs, and started to feel really awkward and uncomfortable. I headed back outside and got in the car. I sat there for a little while, and after a minute, I saw the curtains on the second story move to the side as if someone was looking at me through the window. I pulled out and drove around the corner, then parked on the street and sat there, just really confused. I didn't know if it was her and she just didn't want to see anyone, or maybe one of her kids. I was also concerned with whether or not I should call the police. I drove off, went around the block, and then decided to drive by her house again. I sat there for a little while again, until I saw the upstairs curtains open. I saw a male figure look out, and then closed it quickly as if seeing my truck scared him. I knew Vesna had 2 daughters, and she had a son, but he had passed away years ago, so I'm not sure who could possibly be at her house with her not there, and where would she be anyway? I had been there too long though, and had to get back to work. The following week, there were no orders from her for the first time in almost a year. I drove by her house after I got off on Thursday, and in the driveway was an officer's car. When I got home, I searched her name and found that she had been filed as missing only a few days after I had been there to deliver her groceries. I noticed the date they said she was likely last at home though was the day after she had ordered the groceries. 2 days before, I had gone to her house and saw that man. I went to the police with all the information I had. I don't know who that man was, or if I was close to having something happen to me as well. but it's been nearly 3 years now, and there have been no updates. I worked part-time as a DoorDash delivery driver last year. I had another job at a clothing store, but on certain days I would actually make more money doing deliveries due to more people ordering on specific days. So on those days I'd spend most of my night driving around. Doing this for almost 6 months at the time, I had gotten very familiar with it, and it was kind of just second nature. To make things better, my town rarely had any traffic, even during rush hour. Anyways, it was a regular night of delivering, and I had just picked up a large order from a fancy restaurant and began making my way to the customer's house. Big, expensive orders are always the best ones to do. These orders pay more and really didn't take any extra effort compared to other deliveries, so it kind of just felt like a bonus. I pulled into the neighborhood of large homes, which made sense considering the size of the order and the fancy restaurant. It was a very foresty area, with most of the houses hidden behind long driveways that went into the trees. The customer's house wasn't too far into the neighborhood though, it was only a couple minutes down the road. Usually I'd park on the side of the street and walk up to the front door, but with driveways like these, I would obviously just go down them to get closer to the house since they were so far away. But as soon as I turned onto the driveway, I slammed on my brakes. There was a chain held up by 2 pillars on either side of the driveway, blocking the entrance. I'd seen these before, but I'd rarely ever see the chain actually connected. I figured they'd just forgotten to undo it, so I got out of my car and made my way over to the pillar on the right side. I immediately noticed there was a lock on it that required a key, preventing me from just removing it. I stood there annoyed, and looked down the driveway, but I couldn't even see the house from where I was, so I went back to my car and grabbed my phone to call the customer. A man answered after the first ring, and I explained that I was their DoorDash driver and that the chain was blocking the entrance to their driveway. He responded, saying that there was no easy way to unlock it right now, but the house wasn't very far down, so I shouldn't have to walk very far. I pretended to be nice and said okay and hung up. "Typical rich family," I whispered to myself as I reached into the passenger seat to grab the large bag of food. I made sure to lock my car, then walked around the chain and down the path. About a minute into the walk, I started getting a little nervous. It was really dark, and they didn't have any lights on the side of their driveway. I still wasn't able to see the house yet either, which I thought was strange since they had told me that it wasn't a long walk. Then I heard crunching footsteps coming from the dark trees to the left of me. I stopped and stared at the direction they were coming from as they came closer and closer. I began to make out a figure of a man, holding his hand up as if to say hello. "Who are you?" I asked, trying to hide my shaky voice. The man joined me on the driveway and explained that he was the one I just talked to on the phone. I was still uncomfortable and asked what he was doing. He took a step forward, then began saying that the driveway took a sharp turn up ahead, and it was actually a shortcut to go through the trees, so he figured he'd meet me halfway since it was a long walk for me. I found this whole situation to be really strange, and he had said on the phone that it was a short walk, but now he was admitting that it was long. It just didn't add up. The man stood a few feet away from me and held his hand out for the bag. I hesitantly stepped towards him and handed him the food. He thanked me and turned around to head back the way he came, but then he stopped and turned to face me again. "I forgot to bring your cash tip," he said, looking me in the eyes. Something about the way he said it made me extremely uncomfortable, so I said don't worry about it and started walking back down the driveway to my car. "It's just a quick walk through here. If you want to come with me, I can drive you back to your car once I give you your tip." I didn't respond and began walking faster down the dark driveway. A few seconds later, I heard leaves crunching as the man walked back into the trees. I was just glad he didn't try to follow me. Once I got back to my car, I drove off quickly and ended my deliveries for the night. When I made it home, I reported it to the police just in case, and an operator said they would send an officer down to talk to the owners of the house. I still get chills thinking about the whole situation, mainly because I got a call a couple hours later from an officer explaining that he talked to the residents living in the house, but they had no idea what he was talking about, as they didn't order anything for delivery. I don't know if the residents were lying or not, but either way, it was a very disturbing experience and has made me a lot more cautious when doing deliveries at night. It was a regular night of delivering pizzas around my town, and I was in the middle of heading to probably my 8th or 9th customer of the night. I typically just play music and kind of space out as I drive between the houses and the restaurant, as it can get really boring after a while. But as I made my way down the dark, empty roads, I noticed a couple warning lights on my dashboard suddenly turn on. It was a little alarming, but they weren't anything important, so I continued on. My car was pretty old and had a lot of miles on it, but for the most part it did well, so I figured it must just be a false alarm or something. Unfortunately though, as I continued down the road, more and more warning lights began to turn on, before the check engine light flashed and eventually my car sputtered to a stop. I'd never had a car break down on me before, so I honestly wasn't too sure what to do. The first thing I did was try the ignition again, just to see if it would start back up, but it was completely dead. I looked around and noticed I was pretty far from anywhere useful. I knew where I was, as I'd driven down this road many times before, but the nearest place that would be open at this time was a gas station that was about a half-mile away. So I called the customer and let them know about my situation, and then I called my work and let them know as well. My manager basically said to not worry about delivering the pizza, and to just figure out my car situation and then head home for the night. That actually gave me a bit of relief, knowing that I didn't have to worry about work anymore, but I still wasn't really sure what to do. I ended up calling my brother, who lived about 40 minutes away, but he was the only person that I knew would still be awake at this time. He picked up and immediately asked me what was going on. I told him about my situation, and he let out a big sigh, then said he could come and pick me up and drop me off at home. I told him exactly where I was and thanked him, then sat back in my car, relieved that I was able to get some help relatively quickly. After a few minutes of waiting, I opened up the box of pizza and took a couple of slices, figuring it would be a waste if I didn't help myself to it. It was actually really dark in the car since the battery was dead, so I had my phone light on and laid it on the center console so that I could see a bit better. But after about 15 minutes of waiting, I saw a figure appear from down the road, walking towards my car. I felt pretty vulnerable in my position, so I turned my phone light off and hoped that when they passed by, they wouldn't even notice that I was there. Though, once they got a few feet from my car, they slowed down and began looking at my car as if they were inspecting it or something. Then the man came up to my window and knocked, as if he wanted me to roll it down. Of course, I wasn't able to, so I loudly spoke, telling him that I couldn't. He looked offended and responded, asking me for a lift to the gas station down the road. This was when I started to get a strange feeling about this guy, as I felt like it was pretty obvious that my car had broken down, so I knew he had to be up to something. I didn't respond and kind of just sat there watching the guy, hoping that he would go away. He continued asking for help though, getting more and more aggressive about it. Then he went silent for a moment, before suddenly grabbing the door handle and shaking the whole car as he tried to open the door. I began panicking, unsure of what to do, so I looked around for something to defend myself with, but all I could find was a small screwdriver in my glove box. At this point, the man started stabbing the window with a small knife as if he were trying to break it. He made a few large scratches on it, before beginning to wedge his knife in the top of the window to forcefully push it down. I was yelling at him and screaming for help, but I knew my efforts would go unheard. He continued for over a minute with pure anger in his eyes as he tried everything to get in, but then he stopped. He stood there for a moment, silent and breathing heavily. He pushed his face against the window and stared at me with rage and disgust, then smashed his fist into the door one last time before running back down the road into the darkness. When my brother arrived, I showed him the scratches and dents on my door, and we left in a hurry, calling the police on the way to my house. I'd never feared for my life as much as I did on that stranded road, but the one thing I can't get out of my mind ever since then was the look in the man's eyes as he stared at me through the window. It felt as though I was just inches away from a monster, eager to perform a brutal and horrible attack on me as I sat there alone and helpless. During college, I worked at a small restaurant that was open late, which was usually 1 a.m. most nights. Most customers would either come in and order or call an order for pickup, but every once in a while, someone will ask for a delivery. I always enjoyed doing the deliveries because I'd get to leave the place and drive around while getting paid, plus the tip money was always nice. Anyways, we had a small delivery order for a customer that ordered at 12, so this was my last delivery of the night before getting off. I got in the car and started down the road. The GPS said it was 15 minutes away, but our restaurant was located right next to a highway, so for pretty much every delivery, I'd be on the highway for a few minutes before taking an exit and entering a neighborhood. I got on the ramp to enter the highway, and usually no one is out this late at night, but as I started to go down the ramp, I noticed a car coming toward me in my side mirror. From the headlights, I could tell they were far away, but they were also going really fast. Either way though, I had to merge onto the highway, so I slowly turned in and stayed in the far right lane. The car behind me then merges from the middle lane into the far right lane as well, practically slamming on the brakes as he comes towards the back of my car. What the hell is wrong with this guy? I thought, as he just put both of our lives in danger for absolutely no reason. I figured he had to be drunk or just some idiot that thought it would be funny to scare me, but after a few minutes, he still stayed right behind me. I wasn't really sure what he was doing at this point, but it wasn't funny at all. My exit was coming up, so I was just hoping he'd leave it alone once I turned off the highway. But of course, the guy followed me. The house I was delivering to was in a big neighborhood right next to the highway, so I turned in and started driving down the neighborhood streets. Once we got deeper in, the guy behind me turned all of his headlights off. This is when I really started to panic. I'd had stupid drivers follow me for a bit because I accidentally cut him off or something, but this was going too far and I hadn't even done anything to them. Thankfully, the house was just down the street at this point, so I figured I'd pull into their driveway and try and get the customer to answer the door as quickly as possible so that I wouldn't be alone. I drove my car up the right side of their driveway, which I immediately realized was a bad idea as the car pulled up right next to mine on the left side of the driveway. Before I could even get out, a man came out of the car, swinging his driver door open aggressively. He started yelling at me angrily and waving his hands around, making his way towards my window. This guy sounded completely crazy, and his words were slurred, barely making any sense. I was pretty confident that he was just drunk and wasn't too scared, but then he pulled out a small knife from his pocket and started banging on the window with it. I quickly put my car in reverse and backed out as quick as I could. The man continued to chase my car down the driveway, waving his knife around and screaming. I drove a few blocks down, then pulled over next to a random house and called the customer that I was supposed to deliver to. They picked up immediately and asked me if I was okay. I guess they were watching from their window. I told them I was fine and asked if the guy was still there, but thankfully he had left and I was able to get them their food. I told my coworkers what had happened when I got back, but none of them believed me. Honestly, I don't blame them though, because it was just a crazy situation and it really didn't make much sense. I'm not sure what that guy wanted, but I know it definitely could have ended much worse than it had.